Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas.
And I'm Suzanne Zargis.
We're coming to you from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in the Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
Well, thanks for joining us this week. We are going to start with our In Case You Missed It. So in case you missed it, the latest blog post is up, and it's all about the difference between OneNote in the browser and OneNote on your desktop. Now you might be asking yourself, aren't they the same thing? Well, technically yes, but there are some differences, some key differences, which the blog post highlights for you in a nice laid out chart fashion. So if you're ever curious about, hey, why can I do this on the desktop but I can't do it up in the browser, or vice versa, check out this blog post.
In case you missed it, the H drive is going away. Right now, it is read-only, and as of December 31st, you will no longer have access to any of your files on the H drive. So hopefully, you've already moved everything you need to the OneDrive. If not, check out the video tutorials to help you do that on Stream. And if you have any questions, feel free to email DLA support.
In case you missed it, we're starting to put out questions on Yammer about things that you would like to do better in Brightspace. So for this first one, it's a poll question. I encourage you to go out there and answer and give your opinion. There's even a spot for if one of the options is not what you want to learn how to do, but you still want to learn how to do something. That would be the other option. You can click on that, and then you can just leave a message underneath, and maybe somebody else will respond to tell you how to do it, or maybe it's something that we set up a training for. And so we're always looking to help you improve your use of Brightspace as a learning management tool and a classroom management tool, and overall just a great tool that you should be using. Check it out, vote, and we'll get back to you when we get back to you.
That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Takes.
Thanks for joining us again today. For this week's Hot Take, we've decided to do something a little different. Instead of sitting talking about a particular article, we talked about a topic, an idea, and that is blended learning. After recording that discussion, and you'll figure this out afterwards with what I'm saying, we realized that it was a long discussion, and we're not done with it. But we also don't want you to sit and listen to an hour-and-a-half podcast, so we've broken it up over the course of 2 podcasts. Today you'll hear the first part of that discussion. Enjoy. So for this week, Suzanne and I are going to start something a little different with Hot Takes. So in the past, we've taken articles that we've read and we've discussed them on here, giving you quotes from them. We're still doing that sort of. We don't have a new name for it yet, so if you come up with something for it instead. But we're going to take a topic, a tool, something you might do in your classroom and kind of explore it a little deeper, a little bit more fuller, because we read a lot of these articles and it's great, and we send them to you, and it's great for you to read them too and internalize them and what they mean. But we don't get to go as deep as a lot of times we really would like to on a particular item, topic, something that you may be wanting to use in your classroom, something you may have heard before but not really understood what it was. So that's what this time is going to be for. I mean, we might go back and forth between doing hot takes and this, depending on what we've learned and what we'd like to talk about. And so today, we're going to roll it off with talking about one of those buzzwords that's we all hear and we talk about during PLCs and team times and during larger meetings and on PD days, and that's this idea of blended learning. Now, initially, blended learning, when I think of that, I think blending, I'm like, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and get my blender, stick some stuff in it, make some cookies. But that's not really what blended learning is. Blending learning, I mean, we both kind of have different definitions of it, I think. And as we've read and continue to learn, it's something that once we get a good understanding of, it'll be very useful.
Right, Mike, great introduction there. Blended learning definitely is one of those buzzwords that's been around for a long time, but I think everyone has their own understanding of what it is. And initially, when I started learning about it, I was confused. I want one solid definition of whatever the term is. I want a black and white picture. But no one's going to get that with blended learning because there's so many variations of a blended learning classroom. And so to elaborate on some of the types of blended learning classrooms that are out there, I'll continue to define from this one article that I have from Scholastic. You have face-to-face blended learning, where most material is taught in the traditional manner. The teacher uses online learning as a supplement or a remediation. So that one's very simple. I think teachers, without even knowing about it, have been doing blended learning for a really long time, and it's just a new name to something they've always done. We have flex. This is online learning, but in a school setting. So when you think of how some students are learning everything online, not in a school building, this one is in a school setting, where teachers provide support as needed, generally through tutoring, either one-on-one or in small groups. After that, we have self-blend. In this situation, students supplement traditional school by taking online classes from home. This model is used mostly to take AP and foreign language courses. The rotation model is used in rocket ship schools. Mike, do you know what rocket ship schools are?
I don't, and I didn't take time to look it up either.
Just to clarify for our audience, Mike did a fabulous job of providing at least 10 different articles on blended learning, so we have plenty to talk about in today's podcast. And it was interesting in two of the articles that I chose, one from the Washington Post and one from the Journal, both talked about this rocket ship school, which many of you probably already know about, but it's a charter school, a type of charter school that is throughout the country. Many people know about it. I just learned about it. So anyways, the rotation model. Students spend a scheduled portion of their day learning online. Essentially, they rotate from classroom to online computer lab and back. Then you have the online lab. Courses are conducted entirely online, including interaction with the teacher, but students do coursework in school rather than at home.
Right, that one might be like more your virtual school. I know that there's one in Greenfield that a lot of students in Springfield actually are part of. The idea of that you're learning completely online and it's very self-paced and so on.
Exactly. So the last one I have on my list here is the online driver, where schooling is online. Students take classes and work with teachers remotely.
So I think it's very interesting because all of those are like different styles of like blended learning. And like when I think of blended learning, I kind of come back to this, like it's a hybrid type classroom. There's the in-person it's got three parts to it, essentially. There's the in-person part, there's the online part, and then there's the independent study time, which is, again, the self-directed and motivated part of it. And so, like, each of these models has, like, some aspect of that. And I think that's what's one of the harder things with blended learning right now is it means something different to everybody.
Right. Very confusing.
And so, like, if we had, like, the commonalities of this is what blended learning looks like, because when I think of, like, the online lab and the online driver examples that you gave, those to me, though, that's not blended learning. That's online learning. Blended learning still involves like meeting in person. And I think that's one of the keys to it, and where it can be successful is having that time where you're meeting together and then going out and then coming back and then going out and then coming back. So it still has that semblance of a regular school day, but I think the roles of both the students and the teachers really change with blended learning.
Right. I agree with everything you just said there, Mike. I think something that might clarify for you in that piece of everything being online, I was very surprised when I read this article in the Washington Post. The perspective that some people have of blended learning is that it is primarily online and with minimal contact with a human. And there is a large number of people who are against blended learning because that's all they know about it. That's all they picture is that completely online piece with no human interaction. And I never even thought that.
Right. And we don't want our students to think that either, because I think one of the ways that the roles of the teacher changes, instead of being the person delivering the content, and you know what, maybe they are. I mean, using Brightspace, for example, like you can make your video lesson, you can make your 10-15 minute video lesson using Mix or Streamcast. And then you can, by using those tools, you can record yourself presenting the lesson. Students can go home and watch the presented lesson, try a couple things out, come back to class, and then you're pretty much in like a lab the rest of the day. So the teacher, instead of being upfront and teaching like the lesson, that part's already been done. And this is where blended classroom comes in really well, is that the main lesson part is already done. So then you come back and you all work together to work on whatever it is that you are studying. And it's more of a lab, and the teacher is more guiding instead of being the all-knowing.
Right. I mean, I love that model, and I'm sure teachers out there who are using this can attest to the same. But to think about when you've got, 20 or 30 kids in front of you and you're trying to give that lecture, everyone's got something else on their mind. They're listening at different rates. Some may be completely in tune. Others might be daydreaming, looking at something out the window. Somebody might be just distracted by any number of things. But just as students learn differently when they're sitting there in front of a teacher, I can completely understand that with the flipped classroom, when students are at home,
blended. Flipped is something different that we'll talk about another time.
In this, well, it's still right. I can understand how students watching a lesson on their own time at their own pace is going to be so beneficial and help them really pay attention and be invested in the learning when they do sit down with a teacher.
And the idea with blended learning is that they have more time to work together. Because I think about when I was teaching, and I don't know if the same would be for you, Suzanne, when you were teaching, but we would try to keep our lessons to 10 to 15 minutes, and then students would have the rest of the time to work on it. Now, I was not the best with time. Even when I stopwatched myself, I still found myself short on time of trying to get across what I was trying to get across. Which, when you're forced to make a video and you're trying to keep it 10 to 15 minutes, you can take out some of the pauses. You can take out some of the time spent writing out the work on the board or writing out the example and like jump the example forward. And so in classrooms, when you're trying to go 10, 15 minutes, and I'm pretty sure that's the model throughout the entire district, is like the 10, 15 minutes, like teacher teaches, and then the I do, and then the we do, and the you do. The I do ends up taking a lot longer in many classrooms for a plethora of reasons. And the fact that when you said 25 to 30 students, that doesn't mean that all 25 and 30 students are sitting there listening attentively. And if you have to correct a student or stop because of a student's behavior in the middle of it, that again takes more time and more time and more time, and time gets lost. And we're always saying, we wish we had more time.
Right. I mean, that's part of the arguments, part of the conversation. I won't say arguments, but part of the conversation when it comes to blended learning is that you cannot eliminate that teacher-student interaction. You can have the 10 minutes of teaching, but you never want to eliminate that time when you have the emotional contact with the student, so that you can see, oh, I need to stop this 10 minutes of teaching because I need to really key in on why they're not understanding the way I'm delivering it right now.
Mm-hmm. But with doing the flipped classroom, you can, because when you make the video or you choose a video that's already been made, you in turn have said, this is how I'm planning on teaching it. Students come in. If they don't understand it, then you work with those students, and the students who do get it, they're off in their own group working on their learning, whether it's worksheets or whether it's time on a particular tool in the classroom, or whether it is some sort of project-based learning or group problems that they're working on.
Exactly. The ideal blended learning situation has a teacher that has a very engaged role and is using the technology to get to know the students better. There's a strong classroom culture in place that's widely shared in practice. Mm-hmm. And there's a clear purpose to every learning experience. Those are key points that I could even repeat them again. So engaged role for the teacher, strong classroom culture in place. I mean, just imagining all the different technology that can be used. If you don't have that strong culture, it's not going to be as effective and ideal as you want. And the clear purpose to every learning experience. So all of that is so critical. It's going to take more time.
Right.
It's definitely going to take more time to implement this effectively. But every teacher, I'm sure our listeners could justify this. Every teacher who does this can see the difference and can see the rewards in putting in that extra time to plan it perfectly.
Right. It's a lot of front-end work that has to happen. You had mentioned the Washington Post article. It was really actually a very interesting article because it goes back and forth between, is blended learning the greatest new thing out there, or is it a bunch of foo-foo, basically? And then they start to break down different things. They talk about the origins of a myth, the myth that blended learning is going to take the teacher away from the classroom. You, I, and every human being in the entire United States knows that you cannot replace a teacher in a classroom. It's just not possible. There might be some politicians who think that, but they've never been in a classroom, so they don't know. And so I like that the article kind of goes around and this is why people are excited about it. This is this and this is that. Why there's hype to it. And that's why we're starting to see software companies make adaptive learning programs. Of course, again, that always goes back to that fear that the computer's going to replace me. It's really not, because unless that computer is artificial intelligence, and not the artificial intelligence that we have now, but more the kind that you see in the movie that is so smart that you can have a conversation with a robot and you think it's real. Until we get to that point, which will probably be never, because we're all afraid of robots. We've seen Terminator movies. We know what happens when iRobots come. Or is it iRobot, the one with Will Smith? I don't know. There's a robot movie with Will Smith that they just kind of take over. And that is a big fear. And that's why the guy, Elon Musk, has warned about if we continue on with artificial intelligence, it's going to be dangerous. In classrooms, that's teachers now should never worry about that, because that is hundreds of years away. And at the rate we're going, who knows if the Earth is still going to be here.
Right. I won't go down that road. Never say never, but I won't go there. I like to have hope, as always, and I'll always see the positive in blended learning and in so many other things related to education and technology. If blended learning is to lead positive outcomes for students, then it must be highly relational, active and inquiry-oriented, both online and offline, and commit to empowering students with digital tools. That says it all right there. We're empowering students. And the more they feel empowered and able to, take direction in how they want to learn and what they want to learn, guided effectively by our fabulous teachers, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, and so with the Post article, again, we're going to have all of these links within our show notes, but they talk about the harm, is how harmful is too much screen time for the students? How harmful is it to their creative ability to problem solve? And so I think it is important to, whenever you're looking at anything in education, you have to, one, find a balance. It can't be all online. And I'm sure we'll see with schools that are trying this, they will have their successes, but then those successes will be short-lived, because there's a million other things that go into teaching students other than sitting in front of a computer answering a bunch of questions. And I'm sure as the technology gets better, the article, one of the people they interviewed in the article says, as technology gets better, it will improve the quality of instruction. But I think what we can't do is try to improve the quality of instruction at the, what is the word I'm looking for?
Expense.
At the expense, thank you. At the expense of teaching the students now. Because what we're going to run into, and what we'll be running into, is students who become adults who are not well equipped to problem solve in the world that they are living in. I think a flipped classroom, which I know I just said, and we're not talking about flipped right now, we're talking about blended learning. And I think that is also the problem.
Right.
Is that when people think blended learning, they think flipped classroom.
Right.
And they're two separate things. And even the Washington Post article kind of goes back and forth, using those words interchangeably, but they're different. And so I think it's important to know, like, a flipped classroom is students do all of their learning outside the classroom, and they come together and work on project-based learning within the classroom.
I think bottom line, to clarify it, is really very simple. Blended learning is a blend of online learning and not online learning.
Right.
So however that presents itself, teachers can know that, yes, I participate in blended learning. I can't imagine there's one teacher in this district that is not participating in blended learning. It's
at
automatic.
Some level.
Exactly.
So, what I also liked, before we move on from the Washington Post article, there was a part in it that they talk, or at least I move on from it, where they said, like, when you look at myths up close, it's like a deep reflection of ourselves and society. And, like, just thinking about that, like, right now, like, we're glued to our phones. We're glued to people knowing us, and we want information at our fingertips. 15 years ago, information at your fingertips was walking into the library and grabbing an encyclopedia and maybe venturing out online. But the idea that's right now, we all desire the ability of choice and individualization. I mean, think about this, like, with our cell phones, there's so many different kinds of cell phones. And then on top of that, there are so many companies that are making cases for cell phones to help you individualize. And so the idea of blended learning and being able to individualize, like, hey, here's your path of learning, it's very, very, I guess seductive would be the word, is like, because then we can see, like, ooh, I can just, if my students just do this, then it will be great. And again, that's not really what flipped learning is all about.
I think just to add on top of that, Mike, I think one way to look at it too is that in an effective blended learning classroom, even though it does take that extra time to plan initially, the end result is really that it's a lot easier for the teacher, that they're not standing up there lecturing the whole class period, and they get the reward of seeing the excitement in their students' eyes for learning, for really getting enthusiastic and engaged in what they're learning. And then the teacher can stand there and say, I did this.
So our blended learning discussion may end today, but that's just today's part of it. This is a huge topic that I imagine over the course of the rest of the year we'll continue to come back to. New articles are posted out there every week. There's new things that we get access to as teachers in the district that will come out to you. And so as things change, the initial discussion might still be the same, like what it is, but then we have so many resources that we can access, so many articles that we can point you to, and the ability to, like, go out and help you if this is something that you truly want to learn how to do, because we have that ability. We have connections. You have connections, whether you know it or not.
We have the technology. Does that ring a bell,
Oh, boy.
Mike?
We have the technology. We can repair them. What's that, the $1 Million Man?
That's it.
Look at that. That was way before my time, but I still knew it. So that is our discussion today on blended learning. If you have comments, questions, things that you heard us talk about and you want to know more about, post those questions in Yammer. So coming up next is our weekly interview. This week's interview comes to us from Rebecca Johnson. I met with Roni Gold, the math ILS over Rebecca Johnson, and we talked about all things technology over there and the things that he's been doing in his class. And we even had a very interesting discussion on Google versus Microsoft. So check it out.
My name is Roni Gold. I teach at Rebecca Johnson. I'm the math ILS for Rebecca Johnson, and I've been here since 2008.
So have you been the math ILS since 2008?
No, I was a fifth grade teacher before coming to Springfield as well. I was teaching in New York, but in Springfield from 2008 to, I want to say, 2012, I was a fifth grade teacher. And since 2012, I'm the math ILS.
So in those early years of teaching, what was your experience using technology in the classroom?
Technology's always been something that's been present in my room as a classroom teacher for sure. As early as 2005, when I was teaching in New York, I got, and still have in the closet somewhere, old Dell PDAs, X51s that kids were using to interact with a smartboard in the room. You were able to do that back then when they were providing service for PDAs. But I had a smartboard in the room. I have frequently used online learning programs, whether it's Accelerated Reader, whether it's Dreambox that we're using now. I've always seen tech as a way to make my job more efficient and make the learning more engaging.
So you mentioned Dreambox. Now in the district, Dreambox is one that schools can choose to use. Can you describe it so that our listeners who don't have it understand what Dreambox is?
Dreambox is an amazing math program, and it's a personalized adaptive learning program where each student, when they log on, the platform knows them and tailors the work specifically to them. Something that sets Dreambox makes them unique is that the students are always engaged with virtual manipulatives. So just like they might have fraction tiles in the room, or they might have a number balance, or they might have an abacus in lower grades or a 10 frame, the students need to show their learning through manipulating an object. So it's not about clicking. It's not about picking A, B, or C. It's not about typing in the right answer necessarily. It's about, can they adjust this object to show they understand the math? And I think that's really powerful because it gets to the parts of math where it's more rigorous, and it's more about understanding the concept and the application, not necessarily just knowing the steps, but knowing how to prove your thinking. So it's a wonderful program.
So you would recommend for schools Dreambox over something like iReady, or?
From my experience, I know that there's a lot of schools and a lot of great things about iReady. And I think in the end, a program is truthfully only as good as the teachers are using it. Mm-hmm. So students are going to grow if teachers are effectively and students are effectively using a program. Something that I did notice when we were looking at iReady and Dreambox was this idea of the virtual manipulatives, and that it wasn't something that the students could click their way out of. Mm-hmm. I did feel like iReady had that possibility. And also, iReady I felt like was more of a tutorial where the kids learn from there rather than an interactive experience where they weren't necessarily listening to instructions, but more having to be manipulating things and prove their thinking in order to learn.
So how does a teacher use Dreambox in the classroom?
We have a variety of ways that it happens here. There's many teachers use it as a center. And so you really want, depending on the grade level, whether it's 60 minutes or 90 minutes a week. K2 is about 60 minutes, 3-5 about 90 minutes a week. And so teachers do it in a center where the students go for 30 minutes and work on Dreambox that way. Sometimes the way their schedule works, it's easier that they do whole class and the teacher pulls individual students for their own intervention while the whole class is on the computer. But because we have the laptop carts and we have the devices in the room, at least for 3 to 5, and we're sharing it with K2, it's pretty easy for a teacher to find a time in the week to get it in because we have the resources and the scheduling flexibility.
And because we are very heavy on data in this district, have you seen correlations to classrooms that use Dreambox with Fidelity having better scores, or?
Absolutely. Certainly, it's allowed not only the students who are struggling in math to make great gains, but we've actually seen a lot of data where the students who are actually proficient advancing and doing really great. We just got our MCAS scores back, and 2 out of the top 5 schools in the district are Dreambox schools. So that was really exciting to see. But again, it's just about the fidelity and using it correctly. Mm-hmm. Are there schools that are still learning how to use Dreambox that didn't perform well? Sure. But I think that is more towards learning how to use a system versus the system being what is the most important.
You made a great point right there at the end of that with learning the systems with fidelity. As a former teacher, now ILS, what do you see as some of the struggles or some of the great things with trying to learn a system kind of on the fly?
I think, and especially in my experience when I've seen something new, for instance, like we're using Class Notebook with staff, and it's something very new to me, and I'm learning it on the fly. But it's most important to get a program going. It's okay to struggle and fail and have to change things, but if we try to prepare too much ahead of time, we're wasting the time to learn as we're going. And so I think it's most important to just get a program going, have it in place, have this time and the structure in the day to make it happen. And once it's moving, once that motion is happening, and you're getting that momentum, then you can go in and fine tune it. So for instance, with Dreambox, there's a wealth of tools and resources on there that teachers can use to really personalize things even better than the program can and really tailor it towards their class instruction. But what we wanted to first do is say, get the laptops out and get your students on for this much time during the day. How they use it wasn't as important necessarily initially as getting the students to use it and getting the teachers to log in and look at data at least once a month, once a week. Get those habits in where this thing is there. Now that it's present in your room, now we can fine tune it. Now we can learn how to make it better. So really it's just more towards action versus planning, I guess is what I'd say.
That's a good thought going forward with any kind of system, is just get in there and go for it.
Yeah, that's what happened with the Class Notebook is I started using it for our staff and they said, why did I get this sent this one to me? Why did I get this one sent to me? And after sending a few of them, I got it right. But it took making those mistakes and getting things launched to where I think we got a really amazing tool now that teachers are using. And it's all not necessarily a credit to me, but a credit to them to be, all right, I'm going to go there. They were committed to, all right, we'll try it. I'll try it, and then we're fine tuning it, and just because we said, all right, let's just go ahead and play.
So you and I have had conversations in the past. I remember you saying that you were very big into Google Classroom and using Google tools, and now you're starting to use more of the Microsoft tools. What has caused that shift for you?
So yeah, I mean, I was for many years, and still now, Google has its place where it's got tools that are useful. In 2009, I got selected to go to a Google Academy for Teachers, become a Google certified teacher. I used it as a classroom teacher in every day, multiple times a day. I mean, Google's tools, whether it was Docs, whether it was Forms, whether it was using a class website. But with anything, I think that we needed to not be wedded to a specific tool, but meeting the function. And as I've seen, I worked in the district trying to see if there's ways to get us more Google oriented, but we made a commitment, which makes perfect sense, to be Microsoft. And Google was allowed if we want to use it, but the district is a Microsoft district, it seems like, committed for a long time. And I think that what I started to see is as Microsoft's tools got better, the integration with our school systems in Microsoft was to a point where nothing Google had to offer Microsoft and the tools we have couldn't do and do better. And so with Class Notebook, with OneDrive, with Microsoft Teams, with all of these tools that they have that do what Google Docs was doing, do what Google Forms was doing in Google Drive, now it's Microsoft OneDrive. I mean, I think I don't shy away from saying, no, I'm a Google teacher now. I'm full in on seeing how Microsoft and how the district's systems are linked to it makes my job way easier. And so I've certainly am using Microsoft way more.
So as an ILS, you get to travel into lots of classrooms. At Rebecca Johnson here, this is a very large school with many classrooms. So what are some of the great things that you've seen teachers doing?
Great question. It's what I love about it is that nearly on a daily basis, I'm surprised by how teachers are using technology in a way that I didn't know was happening. And so just the other day, we had some paraprofessionals, I guess, that were, the teacher was in the back doing some assessment with a small group, and the paraprofessionals were up there working with, we have Mimios, which are the affordable smart board. And so the teacher had a full class of kindergartners interacting with the Mimeo and creating a really engaging lesson that way. And I guess what I mean by that is empowering their students and other staff to not be afraid of technology, but actually embrace it and see it as something that everyone should meaningfully be doing. With Teams, we have a 5th grade teacher, Raven East, who's really taken the lead on that, along with our 4th grade teacher, Kelly Fay, on how this brand new tool that they've really received no training on. We've said, hey, it's available, try using it. And already students are really excited about using it, and interacting with their students, creating documents. The other day I had a 4th grader from Mrs. Hallen's class, send me his math poster through OneDrive, because, just he gave it a shot. She didn't tell him to do it. It was just, she had them working on these posters and he knew how to hit the share and share with me. And so seeing things like that where students are taking the lead on using technology, every level of our school using technology. I mean, our principal, Miss Milner, sending us her Discovery Ed board, which she's updating with information for the staff. When I go onto our OneNote, I feel like I'm managing it, but we have a whole collaboration section, and I'll click on a page and just be blown away by a team that has put on so many resources to use with each other and to use with their students that I was like, how did they do that? And so I think those are some of the amazing things. Even teachers asking me in the hall, hey, that aren't tech friendly necessarily, and it's something that's challenging for them, asking me to put things on the OneNote because they are using it. And they're like, hey, can you get this? Just earlier this morning, a teacher said, can you get these documents on there for me? It'd be easier for me. And so seeing teachers think how technology can improve for them is constantly happening here.
For my final question today, we are in the middle of your school day. If you had the opportunity to stand in front of all the new teachers in the district and just talk to them about using technology in the classroom, what would you say?
Wow. I think I would say, I guess there's two things I would say is really don't be afraid to try something and fail and mess up with it. That mistake, that error is actually going to help you get better in the long run. So really embrace that, embrace the challenge of technology as knowing that if you use it the right way, it's going to make teaching and learning better for you and for your students. At the same time, don't let it interfere with what's most important, that students are learning. Make those risks, but don't let it take over too much. I certainly have had those days where I've struggled with tech and it got in the way of me maybe getting to a group because I was like, wait, let's just try this. There's a time and place for trying things with tech. You don't want it to interfere with the learning. So, but I really think like making that leap and doing that. And also understand that the really great thing about, I think, with Springfield is we have a huge community of teachers district-wide that are amazing with technology. And so getting on Yammer, using Skype, use those ideas to use those tools to connect to not only other schools, but staff. I mean, like yourself. It was amazing last year where just because of Yammer, you and I connected. And next thing you know, you were in our 5th grade room helping us with using, I think it was OneDrive and sharing documents and seeing how classes and having Sean Fitzgerald connect with us in Teams. And I think understanding that the district is there to support you, both OITA, but also teachers around the district. There's a lot of resources to tap into to understand better how to make tech help you and your students.
Well, thank you for your time. I know it's a very busy day on Mondays when we get back over the weekend.
Hey, appreciate it.
So Suzanne, our interview with Roni, what do you think?
Loved it. As always, Mike, I'm always impressed with the teachers and ILSs that we have in this district. And you could clearly hear his enthusiasm about using technology in the classroom. Technology makes his job easier. He's always been a supporter of technology. I could listen to the interview again and again. I could bring that out on the road, right? I mean, so many points that he made, I think teachers need to hear every day. The point about making mistakes along the way. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's okay to struggle and fail. You have to be able to change.
Yeah, I know, especially when he was talking about making mistakes, my heart kind of like stuttered a little bit when he's like, yeah, I made a bunch of notebooks. I'm like, you made a lot of notebooks.
But that's how you learn.
But
that's the only way you learn.
Exactly what he was talking about. It's like, that's how I learned how to use it well. And now that he's using it, like we'll hear from other teachers in his school later on through the next couple of months of their use of OneNote. And because of what he decided to start doing, they are now trying to do with their students, which I think is pretty awesome. It was great to hear a description of Dreambox, because I came from a school that didn't use it, so I had no idea what it was, and it sounds like it's a pretty great program with the ability to use virtual manipulatives. In math, so often we're wanting to like tactile, here's my 10 rods, here's my sheet that I'm going to move things across. Like, it's great to hear that there are programs out there that do that.
Right, I agree. I did not know about that either, and that was always a question I had, because in my mind you needed those manipulatives, and then you still do in the primary grades, but as the kids go up in grades, I can see that that's a definite advantage.
So one of the things with the interview with Roni, because I pulled up, and he actually had no idea I was going to actually pull it up either, was a few years ago when we started talking, and we made connections throughout time, and even more stronger connections now. But he was a Google teacher. He's a Google certified teacher. And so to hear him talk about using Microsoft products and just being able to hear yeah, they're good, just like the Microsoft ones are good. But the real difference is now there's no major difference that makes me want to use one over the other.
Right. I was glad to hear that, Mike, because I had read an article recently that gave me the impression that the reason that some people do use Google over Microsoft is that Google was easier to get their head around. It was easier to understand. So I thought, all right, well, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I was very happy to hear that Microsoft has come up to speed with Google.
Yeah, it's come to Roni's approval. With the interview, it was great to also hear, because he's an ILS, he gets to do more than you and I do, get to go into classrooms, and just to hear him rattle off, teacher after teacher doing great things in the classroom is exciting to me. And I hope our listeners also were excited and encouraged by that.
Yeah, completely agree. I love that he was surprised. He said he was surprised daily to see what his teachers are doing. That's what I want to see. I want to go out to all these schools and just see all the awesome things you're doing, because I know you're doing it. We're just here to support you.
With OneNote, he was talking about how they've started to use that as a way to collaborate as a staff, which I remember being a teacher, and that was one thing I always felt hey, this is something we could do a little better, is being able to talk to each other and to see what each other is doing in the classroom. And most of the time in our classrooms, we can't get out because we're responsible for teaching those students. So getting time away to go observe somebody or to see what they're doing is difficult. And using OneNote is one of the ways that we can kind of combat that, which is great.
Right. And I think it's another example of how people need to know that they can use what is most comfortable for them. You can collaborate using Brightspace, creating a PLC course. You can collaborate using OneNote. You can collaborate using Teams. There's so many different tools that are available to the district now, and it's finding the one that's going to work best for you.
So that's our interview with Roni Gold. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. I enjoyed being able to go out and visit with him. Coming up next is our wrap-up. So thanks again for listening to our conversation on blended learning and our interview with Roni Gold. I hope you'll tune in next week to hear the continuation of our blended learning conversation, because I don't know about you, Suzanne, but I felt like there was so much more we could have covered.
Oh, Mike, I could talk about education 24/7. Just ask my husband.
I might. So we are thankful for you and our listeners. One of the things that would help us out is if you go out to Apple and iTunes and review us, if that's the place where you listen to us primarily, or go out to Stitcher or Google Play Podcasts, or if you use Spreaker, which is the site that we host the podcast on, or leave us comments and reviews on Yammer. We'd like to hear back from you. One of the things that we're trying to do is integrate more into what you want to hear about, what you want to learn about, and allow us to just hear from you. And so please do that on those sites. It helps us out because it helps us understand who's listening to us. You can also message us at Twitter. We both have handles. I'm MikeSPSDLA. Suzanne is SuzanneSPSDLA. Brendan will be joining us. He is always out and about doing who knows what with MCAS that you you will be learning about very soon, because as you are probably realizing, this podcast is near the end of November. After November comes December. After December comes the beginning of MCAS. I say it that way because there's a lot that we do to prepare for MCAS. That's one of the big things our department does. And so I'm sure as time goes on, you'll be hearing more and more about us talking about the MCAS and preparing for that. As for now, enjoy your Thanksgiving. I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Zargis.
And we'll see you next week.